Hello, it's your host, Gaia Morrissette of Tickle.Life podcast. We're going to do another confession from your host. That's right. We're going to talk about my juicy life. You ready? Are you waiting? Are you excited? Are you a little scared? All the above. All right, content warning. I'm talking about masturbation and sex toys. All right, so I want to bring you into the world of a younger me, and we're going to talk about my beginnings around masturbation and using other things other than my hands that lead into actually, getting a sex toy, my very first sex toy. All right, so get comfy, sit back, make sure you have your headset on so, no one else can listen to what I'm about to tell you. All right, here we go. So, long time ago, in a land far, far away, there was a younger version of me. So when I was little, I was lucky to be brought up in a household where masturbation was an important thing, and it was encouraged and supported from this concept that my mother always said to me, if you don't know what you like, how can you ever teach somebody else? So that was the premise of growing up in my household. So, yay, my mom did a good job in that department. So I remember the very first time I started I've been, exploring with my body and, sensations and using my hand and, exploring in that department. And then I remember thinking well, what would happen if I used something else? And so it started off with, I found this, I had this long plastic fluorescent glow-in-the-dark string, and it was kind of like, it was plasticky, almost like a licorice, one of those like licorice ropes, but it was like plastic. And I don't know what possessed me, but anyways, I inserted it inside me, and then I would slowly pull it through my labia beside my clitoris, and that would get me off. So it was like my first foreign object, so to speak. And then I progressed to, because when I grew up, we had these metal hangers. And so I would take the flat edge of the metal hanger, and I would put it, lean it up against basically between my labia. And I would then, put my panties on, my underwear on, so that it was pushed firmly up against my clitoris. And then I would take the top of the clothes hanger, and I would wiggle it back and forth. So it would basically move my clitoris back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I used that for years, and I loved that. Now, it's interesting because as I'm telling you this, I don't remember feeling bad about it when I was using these foreign objects, except for I knew that I couldn't talk about it, and I couldn't tell the secret of it. Like, it was okay to masturbate in my household, but I don't think that it would have been okay if I was using other things. And as I'm telling you, I think this might be actually the very first time I've ever talked about these things publicly. Look at that. You're getting something new. You're getting my first vulnerable share. I believe that I don't think it was wrong. I think it was like, wow, look at me doing creative problem solving, finding new ways to get off. Even when I was young, yay me. But there's also a part of me as I'm sharing that I am feeling, I'm going to own this because I think this is an important piece, is that um, really kind of uncomfortable and kind of worried a little bit that you're going to judge me. Um, and, I thought it was important that I share that this is what I'm kind of feeling right now as I'm sharing this. So now I know you wonderful audience, you fantastic listeners are going to not be judgy at all. And you're totally going to be like, wow, that reminds me of when I used to hump my, this, or when I explored that. So that's why I'm sharing this. I'm sharing this because, first of all, I want to normalize it. Second of all, I want everybody to feel like you're not a weirdo and you're not a freak and there's nothing wrong with you. And in the early stages of our exploration of our bodies, we come up with all sorts of interesting ways when things feel good. So that's why I'm sharing. Okay, so back to my story. So we moved to, all right, so now we've moved to clothes hanger. Now, past the clothes hanger, one day I was, vacuuming, doing my chores, and I don't know, the suction kind of felt good on my hand. I was like, oh, I wonder what that would feel like on my vagina. So I locked the door, and I went to the bathroom and I locked the door and I turned on the vacuum cleaner, and I had this intense orgasm. Now again, I didn't think that it was bad, but I also knew that it wasn't okay. So there was there were weird sort of feelings about it. It was like, if somebody found out that I was doing this, I was going to get in trouble. So there was this element of it wasn't okay. So it gets compiled. We go to church because I was raised Catholic. So it's Sunday morning when this happened, when I was doing my chores. So we end up in church. And while we're in church, I get my very first period, my first menstruation. And I was for sure believed that God was punishing me for masturbating with the vacuum cleaner. Then that was when it was like, ooh, that was not okay. And I was getting punished by having got my period in church very first time very first time of ever masturbating with the vacuum cleaner. And so then that started to create some I would say it started to create within me a little bit of, I wouldn't say heavy shame, but some shame that I was being punished. There was a punishment factor for finding pleasure in in unexpected places. So fast forward a couple years, I'm still kind of using those, masturbating with my hand and learning about my clitoris and, using those three, items, interchangeable. And, I end up having sex and a boyfriend and all those kind of things. And then my best friend, because I was constantly getting myself into trouble making some bad life choices because I was incredibly horny. And I would go through these phases where I was so overwhelmed with sexual energy and sexuality that I, necessarily wouldn't make good choices about who I might have sex with because I was so horny I needed to get off. So he decided for Christmas that he would buy me a vibrator. And we grew up in a really tiny town, so there's only one sex toy store. And in that everybody, if you were seen walking into that sex toy store, everybody in town knew that you walked into that sex toy store. And you had to be 18. So I believe I was 18 or 19 at this point. I think I was 19. We were 19. So I guess he walks into the sex store, goes through on his little adventure, all for his best friend. And we weren't having sex. This wasn't a boyfriend that he was going to get any benefits from whatsoever. He was just trying to do a solid, trying to keep me out of trouble. So every year at Christmas time, he would come over to the house and, he would open presents with our whole family because he was, part of the family. And so, and every year, we had the way that we opened our presents as a family is that, one of my younger siblings would be the Santa's elf and would hand each person a present that had their name on it. And then we would all individually open like we would all wait, and that person would open their present and everybody would watch, and then that person would thank whoever gave it to them, and then it would be the next person's turn. So one of my siblings hands me this present, and I don't know what it is, and but it's from my best friend, and and he wasn't really kind of paying attention at the time, and then all of a sudden he sees it's my turn to like open this present. He like jumps across. He's like, no, because I'm about to open my very first sex toy in front of my whole entire family. Luckily, now the funny thing is if that had happened with my family, it would have been a funny story for my family. But I didn't grow up in a typical typical family, so it wouldn't have been the end of the world. However, it would have been an embarrassing moment for all of us. Right? That years later we would laugh about. But anyways, so he like, no, and I'm like, what? And he's like, that's something you have to open in private. I'm like, okay. So I put that aside. We wait until all the presents are done, everything's opened, and then I go and I open it privately with him, and he, got me my very first bullet. And if you're unfamiliar with sex toys, a bullet is basically it is what it looks like. It's like it looks like a bullet. Now back then they didn't have like, like now they have remote controls and smartphone technology and all that kind of stuff. Back then it was a bullet attached to a long wire that was attached to a huge remote or huge controller. Okay. Remember, this is like over 25 years ago. Holy crap, I'm old. That's right. I'm 45. I'm not that old, but I am 45. So, and I named it Bob. This stands for battery operated boyfriend. Now, my vibrator, Bob never replaced any of my boyfriends. And, I've upgraded since then, but I still love my bullets, and I have different types of bullets that serve different purposes. And it's, I carry one in my purse at all times. You never know when you might have an emergency, masturbation emergency. And, so I love that sex toy. So there's my adventure. There's the adventure of like the evolution of my journey into masturbating without my hands. And I think the most important part, if you can take from this wonderful stories, is that masturbation is nothing to be ashamed of. And I think us talking about it is a huge place in which we can normalize it. It's important. And as a vagina owner, it's really important because societally, we're not actually supposed to even talk about wanting to give ourselves pleasure. So that's what I've taken away from this sharing. And thank you for listening, and thank you for not judging. And thanks for all of the wonderful love and support. And I hope it inspired you. To spend more time with me, you can find me at succulentliving.com. And also you can check out my podcast, my own podcast called My Orgasmic Life. And don't forget to do all the wonderful things of spending time with us at Tickle.Life for all of your fantastic sexual education and sexual wellness. All right, that's it. That's all. Who knows what are the next thing I will share about my crazy sex life. Stay tuned.